line. You just don't have to hold that in. You can just leave. And that means now we're actually taping. And that part won't be on the tape for very long. So we turn it off.
Thank you all for coming to this first event in the Department of English, Rhetoric, and Writing's 2006-2007 reading series. A couple things before we start. If you have a cell phone, could you please be sure that it's turned off? And following the reading, Professor Rosser would be happy to take any questions, and then we'll have books for sale up front, which he would be happy to sign for you. I'd like to introduce to you now J. Allyn Rosser. Born in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, she grew up in Sparta, New Jersey, and attended Middlebury College and the University of Pennsylvania, where she received a PhD in English literature. She now lives in Athens, Ohio, and teaches literature and creative writing at Ohio University. Professor Rosser's first book, Bright Moves, won the Morse Poetry Prize, and her second book, Misery Prefigured, the Crab Orchard Award. She has also won the I.B. Lavin Award for Younger Poets from the Academy of American Poets, the Frederick Bach Prize, and a Pushcart Prize. She is also the recipient of fellowships from the NEA, Gatto, Red Loaf, and the New Jersey Council on the Arts. Whether she's writing about a fourth grade square dance, a marriage disintegrating, Prel shampoo, or a landscape painting father brushstroking tiny human figures onto a mass-produced painting hung in his Bermuda hotel room, Rosser takes us to see up close each sweet ache, to wonder about the one music or mystery beyond all the necessary incidental snaggings of the heart. In a style both casual and formally complex, Rosser moves her readers and listeners through the demanding structures of villanelles and end rhyme, through puns and other wordplay, with grace and with the ease of conversation. Her voice is at once artful and frank, is, to quote one of her poems, at once acquired and instinctive. The difficult is made effortless in these very humane and accessible poems which verify whatever brightness embodies us, even in the often flawed and damaged lives we live. In these poems of our lives, the self blurs and pulses between moment and memory, that world which sharpens as it fades. Into her luminous language, Jill Allyn Rosser paints us, adding the human to the light and to its fading. Please welcome Jill Allyn Rosser.
Thanks very much, Sandy, for that eloquent and flattering introduction that now I have to rise to. Thank you to Georgia Poetry Circuit for bringing me here, and of course to this incredible campus, Berry College. I've never seen a campus so beautiful in all my life. You don't know how lucky you are. I've seen a lot of campuses, and this one takes the cake. When you get out of college, you sort of assume, you put a lot of work into your classes, and you figure, well, I'm qualified for something now. I mean, I'm ready for the world, right? And I sort of felt that way too, except I realized that I couldn't get the job I wanted, which was this very simple job of waitressing. I just always wanted to be a waitress, but you know, I had a job in college in the library and a job, you know, little dumb jobs doing this and that to make a little extra money, but I thought, you know, I've never been a waitress, and I guess you have to know how to be a waitress first. And I realized when I got out of college that you have to lie to get a job as a waitress if you're going to get one, and they don't have lying 101 or even 102. They just don't have courses like that, and I think that maybe they should institute that. So when I got out of college, my parents were like, what are you going to do? You know, I'm going to go to grad school, you're going to get a job, you know, with some corporation or do journalism. And I said, no, I just want to be a waitress. And their faces just fell. And of course, I couldn't get the job. I tried, and I couldn't fake it. And I wound up working in a factory for a while. And the other thing you need to know is that they used to sell meat on plastic trays. Now it's mostly styrofoam, but these sharp little trays. And my job at the factory was to squish the trays up and fit them into boxes over and over and over again. And that when you get your wisdom teeth pulled out, if you should do such a thing, you can get real bad bruises. Your face looks all bruised up. Well, it depends on your dentist, I guess. But mine, I had some terrible looking bruises. So this poem is about the experience of trying to get a restaurant job and winding up with the factory job. Getting wise. In the same extreme summer, after walking smartly away from college, only to learn I was incapable of lying believably about having waitressed plenty of times before, in lots of different places, I took a job at the plastics factory and had all 4 wisdom teeth pulled at once. Even then, I think I knew it for cliché, the implausible dream of the privileged. But I had a real desire to feel my own salt soak into the back of my shirt all day alongside non-unionized Puerto Ricans and Vietnamese. Like them, to hold my tongue and bow down to machinery that wouldn't stop, to refuse the earplugs that didn't help, to feel and share their powerlessness. And I felt I did feel it, with all the fierce authority of uttering one's first profoundly earned, God damn it, slamming those sharp-edged meat trays into accordions taut enough for boxes. The heat in there was unholy. My inner forearms ripped to bleeding. Of course, it didn't matter how hard I tried. The others always knew I could walk out when I pleased. And all their broken speeches mended just enough to say so. For fun, the foreman cranked the rollers into double time at my station. I nearly bit my lip right through to keep up. It seemed important to eat those cardboard sandwiches from the vending machine, and to keep from coughing when the plastic fumes were all we had to breathe. The joke wore off, my trays slowed down, and a few of the women began vaguely to include me in break room conversation. The men lent me change and displayed photos of children in glass-beaded braids and ill-fitting Sunday clothes. Still, they wouldn't smile all the way or look me right in the eye. Not until I showed up that Wednesday after the extractions, swollen with blue-yellow bruises along my jaw and under my eyes, would Fatima acknowledge my presence. Your boyfriend, he do this? Everyone at the table was staring. Well, I said, half whispering, and then, he has a terrible temper. The women nodded, the men shook their heads. I thought I could live with a lie so small, but Thursday morning, Jojo greeted me with rice cakes, and Conchita explained about her husband in California. Cheng Lu showed me how to stack boxes so they'd never fall, and invited me home to dinner someday soon. I said I'd come, and really should have come back for my check the next day. I needed them to believe something of me, at least that I needed the money. Instead, I sponged Saint-Tropez bronze over the bruises, coiled my hair in a chignon, put on pearls and long-sleeved silk, walked into the best restaurant in town and told the manager, yes, years and years in every kind of place, you name it, Chinese cuisine, Italian, French. I smiled right in his face. I got the job. It was easy. Dr. Meek mentioned my father's palette for a moment in her introduction. I'd like to read that. My father is the most straight arrow you are ever going to meet in your life. I mean, he wouldn't do anything wrong. He wouldn't use the handicapped stall, you know, if that was the only one left. I mean, this is a man who's just never overstepped any lines, it seems to me. But this one night, he did this vandalism. But he's an artist, he's a painter, and he felt he had to. You know, he just couldn't look at it anymore, this painting in our hotel room. You know the kind. They have the same painting in every room, but maybe the rock is moved a little bit this way, and maybe the wave splashes a little higher in the other one. And somebody's just out there painting, I'm painting, I'm painting. And you may not know Felix the cat. Is Felix the cat still out there? You have to know about Felix that he has this magic bag. It's like a suitcase, little magic bag, and he'd pull stuff out of there. Just you would never know what was going to come out of that bag next. My father's palette. I thought I understood what it was for, like an unopened box of crayons. It was always in the window room with the splattered linoleum floor, even when he wasn't. It was exciting, like Felix the cat's bag of tricks, the primary splotches blending, one day in swirls of autumn russet, the next in summer camembert, or winter's whited blues, or smeared, first muddy, then clear, with the molted rags of my youth he soaked in that Lethean turpentine, a stench that washed all colors back to scratch, to the brown wood, the kidney-shaped monument to every vista he'd sold or given or wordlessly stacked in the attic. I liked to put my thumb in its thumb hole, or to see it humped with rigid blobs left over from the day before, when, calmly as a surgeon in emergency, he'd slit the skins, cerulean or sepia, apply freshly oozing hues to the erection of skewed fence posts and closing his fields of revision. All those long abandoned barns and complicated trees, desolate plainscapes, but no people. Growing up, I couldn't fathom why he left them out, always straining to glimpse the profile of a human head through the glare of his blank windows, trying to see what he saw in uninhabitably old farmhouses, fallow fields. When I asked once, he nodded and said something about, I can't exactly remember, how you didn't have to see people to know they'd been there, or could have been. And when I still didn't get it, he fell silent, vaguely disappointed. I never asked again. He probably thinks I still don't understand, but I remember that time in Bermuda when, drowsy, pretending to be asleep on the ugly plaid couch of my parents' hotel room, I watched my father quietly take in all that was missing in the mass-produced hotel painting. I remember the boring waves spraying over the boring rocks on the wall, and with what restraint he selected the skinniest brushes and the tubes for flesh tone and for swimsuit crimson, stirring on a tinfoil takeout plate. And the placing of the lamp, and how the smoke from his pipe, my mother didn't mind that night, drifted across and above his intent frame as he bent away from us in silhouette to add, with minute strokes, two far-off figures, maybe lovers, to the utterly featureless water. How he added always the human when we couldn't find it in everything. His response to this poem when he saw it was, I'd get arrested now. Great, you know, now everybody knows. And my mother's response was, what was it? It was a really strange thing. Oh yeah, it wasn't such an ugly couch. That would suggest that we had a cheap hotel room. She can't stand that. That wasn't so bad, was it? It was bad. I remember. Where I come from, there's a turtle season, and there probably is a turtle season here too, where they're all crossing the road for some reason, you know, to get to the other side, I don't know, to get to water. And it's horrible because you you're in a hurry and you swerve around them and you say, okay, well, I'm going to come back, I'm just going to get some gas, I'll come back and move it to the side of the road, but I'm in a hurry. And you come back and they're smushed already, and they're such beautiful creatures. Where we are, they're mostly eastern box turtles, and those are, well, they're beautiful, beautiful shells with these like bright yellow, it looks like someone painted bright yellow marks on the side. And I don't recommend you do this at home. I had passed so many turtles like this, I said, okay, the next time I'm going to stop, and it was just really rainy, and it was a back road with a lot of curves, and it was a terribly perilous thing for me to do, to get out of the car and move the turtle to the side of the road. But I did it. And, about box turtles, they are called box turtles because when they pull their heads in, they also have a little door that can close, a little hinged door, and you can hear it go, you know, shutting, and it's really eerie. And you can't get in there, whether you're a bird with a beak or a human with a, you know, there's no way to get in that turtle. I don't know what it is that you would have, a chisel. You know, they're very, very tightly sealed once they decide they're done with you. Eastern box. Like any other revelation, it came at an inconvenient time. Pouring rain, running late, end of a hectic week. I pulled over because the last time I'd vowed the next time I would. They blunder across the macadam, you swerve, and later return to find a shiny, wet mosaic of turtle. This one was smack in the middle, nudging itself over the double yellow line at an idiotic pace, fool's head out and up. I bent down and grasped it. The heft stopped me when I rose. Now 2 fools with one head huddled in the road, while my wipers thunked a thick tattoo like heartbeats on carapace, driver's door ajar. The heft signified more than turtle. Then I heard and felt it groan, the intricately hinged doors of the plastron grinding shut. The shell was smooth and dark and hard, with blazing yellow bird's head glyphs in perfect symmetry skirting the dome. It was a high, gleaming dome, arched in mad exaggeration of any conceivable terrapin need for height or drama or dignity. I kept standing there until my whole body formed a question. My future emptied for what might now fill and direct it. My sometime soul, my mind, open wide, prepared. But it had shut. It was staying shut. As if an ancient lidded bowl, bearing the jewel-heavy wisdom of the ages, had been proffered, turned over to me, right here in rural Ohio, then sealed before I could see. Had I reached for it too casually, or distractedly, too dutifully? How many times has the world called to me when I was not ready? How many times have I heard it groan in just that way, withdrawing, waiting for me to walk it back to safety in the culvert grass, to slide into my car, sodden, disappointed, and slam my own door as the only viable reply. I think that fiction writers have been hogging science fiction for far too long. I don't see why you can't have science fiction poems. So I went and wrote one. And I was thinking, you know, we all have grandparents, grandmothers and grandfathers who want to tell us how hard it was when they were young. Now, no, it depends on how old you are, whether they had to walk to school in the hip-high snowdrifts, or whether they just said, you know, you had to get up and cross the room to change the TV channel. We didn't have Velcro, you had to tie your shoes. You know, I mean, it depends. It's changing rapidly. But I think that they will still have grandpas in the year, say, 2092. Let's pick it out of a hat. And they'll still have complaints about how things aren't the way they used to be and should be. You've got it made. Listen, now is not so bad. At your age, I filled myself with loathing. I slept badly, had dreams, and wept openly at the deaths of friends. Now you don't have to. Why, I used to have to read by the glow of my surge protector. Sure, they charge you for emotions now, but back then when you had emotions, they were impossible to trace, even when they were genuine. They just descended, whammo, unpredictable as flashback. Sadness or fear would break out on your face or alter your voice. Your hands trembled. We tried hypnosis, meditation, even alcohol to steady ourselves, though it left one more wobbly and soured the breath. Everyone was after the same things: company, comfort, worthiness. We wanted to save our faces. Now you get a new one. I can remember when the pursuit of happiness was a privilege. Lord, how we used our elbows. Rat race, rush hour, quaint phrases now. Death was still completely irreversible. That's why we had beauty, capital B. We had to search for beauty, define and redefine and preserve it. This was anguish, yes, but delicious. Can you understand that? A perk. These days, whoever opens your heart is wearing a mask, wielding lasers. Listen, I once followed a girl across 2 whole continents. When I finally caught up with her, she turned out to be all wrong for me. I married her anyway. That's right, that's how we did things back then. Now that was beautiful, that love. She bore me your grandmother, and in you I can almost see, oh, well now look at you. I imagine there are maybe 3 or 4 celebrities per sex that we're going to be choosing from in about 50 years. You know, do you want to be more the sort of Julia Roberts type, or the more kind of like, I don't know, what's her name, Cameron Diaz? Maybe they'll have 18 different ones that you can choose from. We have a mockingbird that comes back every year. I don't know why, to my house in Ohio. I think it's because something about our chimney. It perches on the chimney, and the acoustics are so great that the mockingbird has figured out that his voice is magnified in this wonderful way. He just perches on our chimney. I think because it's not up to code. There's something probably wrong with it. But we get these incredible concerts that, you know, you sit in the living room and it's like right in your ear because it comes through the wood stove. But what strikes me is that they really seem to enjoy it. I mean, the birds, right, they really sound like they're enjoying it. But of course it's just a mating call. And so, you know, every year I think it's going to keep going. But they always stop about like sometime in late June, I think. And they just don't, they make a horrible little buzzy noise the rest of the summer. But they don't have those beautiful song after song. And you know they can imitate alarm clocks, which is really inconvenient. You know, at the wrong time. You can get it at 6 when you didn't want to get up till 7:30. They can do car alarms too. So they'll imitate just about anything. And the other thing I think you need to know is that T.S. Eliot, who wrote The Wasteland, originally titled that work, He Do the Police in Different Voices, which is it comes from a Dickens novel, and that's all you need to know. Ode on a Mockingbird. Lithe shadow, organic jukebox, sly note-taker, twirling your vocal cords about like the rainbowy ribbons of a maypole. What do you love, do you love, do you love? I've let the bird feeder level drop down, but you stay on, enraptured, giddy. Look, I'm not the type to call a poem song or waste ink on what a bird might think. But this one, when he pauses, tips his fragile drab tail at the sky, pauses, then lets fly his. Hey, he has reasons. He's selective, doesn't juxtapose the same way each time around. He seems to swivel with the wind from song to song, though the weathercocks is one he can't be bothered with. each a dead ringer for the source. You can almost hear other birds tisking, "That show-off, faker, no-count bastard of a bird. Just who does he think he is?" It's mating season, of course. He'll be quiet, deathly so, when summer settles in and the whole point eludes him. But for now, like some manic Elliot on uppers, he keeps on. He do the police sometimes all night, occasionally with a bit of nesting material wedged jauntily in the crook of his beak, like a young tough waggling his Marlboro. "Look, ma, no mouth." He warbles, tweets, buzzes, trickles, trills. He does it so well that every single spring I'm fooled. I think, this one is different. He'll keep it up all year. This one does it for sheer love of singing, loves the zillion sing-wingednesses of the world, and wants it all to issue from his breast alone. Lightly, like a spring bubbling up from the dust, loves my alarm clock and the rufous-sided towhee with equal ferocity. This one, the true lover. This one, the Emily Dickinson of mockingbirds, twirling ribbons around neat packets of song. Doesn't care if we're listening, me or the ex, or a current or future maid or master. The last mockingbird on the block doesn't give a twat, twit, twat. What crow's turd? What comes of his exertions? Ruffles, then riffs off again, this time jay, gull, cardinal, dove, red-winged blackbird, phoebe, mallard, duck. It's month 2. By now he's knocked up his share. Come on. By now he's attracted every mocking chick for acres, miles. What keeps him singing? And what will stop him? One day in June, one day soon in June, what caused Emily to tie her final ribbon in the somehow stiller stillness of her room? What silences that kind of lover? What do they know that I don't yet? How do you end the song that might be your last? I understand Albert Goldbarth was through here. Was he last year? Mm-hmm. And originally, an earlier draft of this poem, where it says, like some manic Elliot on uppers, you know, it was Goldbarthian Elliot on uppers, because, I don't know, he just writes a lot of poems. In fact, there was a humor issue of Poetry Magazine this past summer, and they wanted funny contributors' notes, and I don't know if it's funny, but I just said, J. Allyn Rosser is one of 17 noms de plume used by Albert Goldbarth, or pseudonyms. You know? So I just pretended I was one of his, you know, that he not only writes a lot under Goldbarth, but he's got 17 other people. And he wrote back and was saying, yeah, some of those other ones, David Kirby, I'm thinking of dropping him from the list. He's a funny guy. I'm actually going to be seeing a friend in a matter of hours. She's meeting me here. And we don't get to see each other very often, but we go all the way back to high school. And you know, when someone really knows you, you have a self-image, right, that doesn't always match, for example, the photographs people take, or you hear yourself on a tape recorder, it doesn't really sound like you, and that's not really me on my driver's license, you know, that feeling. But your best friend, you know, a friend that goes really far back, knows you in a way that you yourself don't. They know what's really you, and I guess I was trying to get to that. Something about friendship, and how our friends, we adjust to our friends' presence, you know? They want us to be a certain way, and we become whatever it is that they need. I think that's what I was getting at. This poem is called Realism. Realism. She wants it all in, the whole all of it. The clock at precisely 4:40, the shadows impossibly accurate, the very dust in the air, the smudge on the knee of my jeans, every imperfection mise au point. She's my friend, so I hold still for her. And her supple sable brushes, the stiff, thin line of her mouth seeming to force the issue of my exact position versus hers, sharpening my arm against the wall I can't see. She's getting the half moon of my left thumb, the twisted strap with knot, of the worn leather purse slumped at my right, the curled collar facing, the eyebrow tilting up and the eyebrow not, right down to my willfully unwilling stillness. Nonetheless, the portrait is much too smiley for me. I never smile except when she paints me, because I know her flaws, stubborn bitch. I know she'll go ahead and paint a smile in. I figure it may as well be mine. I was watching a documentary of Vietnam soldiers speaking about their experiences, and I was very moved by one in particular. A soldier was talking about how he and an enemy soldier spotted each other at the same exact moment, and they paused. They paused. You know, they just sort of aimed and stared at each other for a while. And I tried to get this right. What I learned, though, I sent this poem to a friend of mine who's a male poet, and I ran it by him, and he said, it's great, except one thing, you cannot say gun. Soldiers don't say gun. They say weapon or rifle. You gotta change it. And it really hurt, because it just so happened that gun was in a place in the poem where it kind of internally rhymed with the word sun, and but I changed it, because you have to, for the good of the poem. You gotta make sacrifices. Soldier lives to tell. Which one saw which one first? Neither one could know. What held our weapons and our gazes fast? A shock of jet hair crossed his brow, sweat stuck, pointing down and away. No shame in hesitation, only danger. All our training, every nerve in our fingers instructed not to do what we were doing, not to not do. But as if he knew that I could sense the sights his eyes were filled with, the nights that cooled him, the days that built his house, as if he'd sat in my kitchen, stroked my dog, we paused. The seconds curled, uncurled. We paused. I could feel my cheek against his rifle, against the almond-scented forehead of his son. We didn't seem to feel the muscle strain a long-held crouch must cause. The foliage between us wavered, subtracted something from the air. Did we breathe? We watched us there, like two gods who'd forgotten you can't have two gods per world, per stretch of field. Were we scared? We aimed and stared, struck both by both our mercy and our might. And then the lesser of us started shooting. It's interesting that I've had some trouble publishing this poem. I don't know if it's because it's a woman writing from a soldier's point of view or if it's because it's political, but I think I'm a pretty good judge of my own poems. I think, it's as good as the other poems that are getting taken, so I have to wonder what's going on there. It's an interesting sociological thing to look into, but I'm not equipped to do. My sister was in an accident, I guess 15 years ago. It's like it was yesterday, because it was so awful. She was in a passenger seat, was in intensive care for 10 weeks, if you can imagine that. And the doctors gave her 1% chance to live, and they do that now, to cover themselves, they probably not going to live, and put the family through, I don't know, what kind of misery, so they don't run into any lawsuits. That's probably why they do it, but it was terrifying. My sister is older than I am, and by 2.5 years, those important halves, remember? 2.5 years, very important. And she was the daredevil in the family, and there were just the two of us, and I was the wuss. I was the official wuss of the siblings, so good for a girl. Boy, we got into scrapes back then, and I'm not talking knees, though yours were always scuffed with real blood. We terrorized sitters, scared the pants off the neighborhood boys. They knew you were the mastermind. My main obligation was to cry when it looked like we were caught. And all the naughty words we knew you'd stolen from the walls and desks good girls were not supposed to see. Sliding curses off your tongue with snide aplomb, the way you sealed our thank you notes for sissy gifts, charm bracelets, sachets, lacy socks. Hey, that's pretty good for a girl, the boys slurred through wads of bazooka when you were first to shinny up the tallest tree on the block in shorts. To get robin's eggs they shrugged at, but wanted more than you did. Me, I was always 2.5 short steps behind and still in the way. I didn't care, I didn't. Headlong after you, I flew from low roofs and unsteady swings, tossing my heart to your wilder tune, to your shaggy boyfriends, the posters you hung. But there was nothing I could offer you hadn't already bitten big chunks from. Did you ever cry your heart out? I never heard you through the door. The night I opened mine, you taught me to dilute tears with expensive scotch. Your head won't hurt tomorrow, whatever else does. Scoffing, reviling the bastards. You covered for me the deeper debts a brotherless youth can lead to. For a full grown-up month I had to watch you strapped to that sweaty plank in the hospital, bruised, bound, gagged, sucking air from a straw and rasping for ice, for a milkshake, for some peace for Christ's sake, writing weakly in a lurchy 4th grade hand, losing years with each pint, behaving like a child for the first time ever in my guarded eyes. I hardly spoke. Live, 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 I wanted to be shouting as you winced and smirked and blamed the nurses for the dangling respirator you'd ripped out yourself. You can do it, I wanted to holler, while you mocked me for being scared like always, scared and still biting my thumb on the sidelines. Live, I couldn't cry out, as you fixed death with a stare it couldn't return, until at last it swore and shrugged and spat and shuffled off like all the stupid boys you'd ever struck out, backing away. Go on and live, it said. And so did I, but shyly, under my breath, since it was at your battered knee and from your bleeding lip I learned to. I think everybody has an article of clothing. It's usually a shirt, it might be shoes, or a hat. Something that you've had for a long time, that's lived through a lot of stuff with you, that you're not giving up even though it's kind of worn out and faded, and everybody says, why don't you throw away that old thing, you know? And I have a shirt, and I've had it for 30 years. It's lived with me for that long. And I thought it deserved to be apostrophized in an ode. We've been together longer than most of my friends, and certainly known it longer than anybody but my immediate family, so it deserves some dignity. So I have addressed it in this ode. At 18, I bought you cheap, long-sleeved navy cotton, reddish birds embroidered at the breast. I wore you everywhere back then, now just around the house to bed. Your weave contains some topical endorphin. You fit like nothing else I own. In fact, you fit like nothing, only warmer. Bearing me patiently along, my hair riding you at every length. You've borne so many gaffes. Everything I should have said in one sleeve, all I shouldn't have tucked up the other. How thin you've become, eroded by my shrugs, reduced by the harsh indignities of the cold water wash, the dank floor corner, the hasty suitcase cram and top drawer stuff, wearing thin beneath bad jokes, those birds that cast their shadow on you, weakened you like Tinkerbell swallowing Pan's poison. When I'm sick, I always reach for you. So many consecutive years of germs, There can't be 1 square inch of your front panel that hasn't tasted wine or Haagen-Dazs. Amazing there's no stain like my skin, no lasting marks of woe, mine or theirs. I learned everything in you. Italian architecture, torts, U.S. history, passages of Proust. Summer nights, we together pored over love's polygraph, the intimate form of you in 5 languages. Remember the fine time we had brushing up on our Hungarian? Shirt. What must my husband think of me, brazenly brandishing you, livery and banner of my past in his bed, wearing memories so tightly to my skin, all these cards so close to my chest? How dare I? How can he share me with you? But truly I can say, you're just a textile in which I longed for him with other men. Actively longed, in hope of him, right? Oh, it's only a shirt, I can tell him. Would you mind that? I want to be buried in you, though I suppose that would be selfish. You'll have more life in you even then, shirt, I'm sure. Look at you now. No holes, not a single seam undone. Although, in places, you are practically transparent. Mere airy adumbrations of elbow. Do other women throw away their shirts or wear them without thinking? I guess they must. My best friend got married a 2nd time in her first wedding dress. It's just a dress, she said. Expensive. He never saw it before, she said. Knew him under 6 months. It still fits me. Do you think this had anything to do with her 2nd divorce? We know that dress knew things she could never tell that husband. Do you remember that day in 1977? Even my best friend was not around, and that was when I really did want to die. And that night you stayed on, you held me. Oh, now, shirt, let's not get sentimental. I mean, I recognize you're just the fabric in which I first heard the voice of Bessie Smith, and in which I decided to have a child. Why didn't you come to the hospital? I missed you. Of course, that was the year you didn't fit. But before that, remember New Year's '87? I was almost a goner again. How lightly you touched my shoulder. Apparently, catastrophe descends on me by decades like cicadas. What happened in 1997? I can't believe I've forgotten. You must have put that one away, shirt. Good. Leave it right where it is. We're going to need all our strength. This next year is 2007, you see. It's dated 2006. Maybe I should have said that. I'm going to just read a real short poem to end here. Go ahead. Maybe I should just turn it over to Q&A, I think, because you guys have classes to get to. And yeah, so thank you. I mean, thank you for sitting here so patiently. So if you have any questions about anything, just don't ask me what the meaning of the universe is, meaning of existence. I'm still working on that one. Anybody?
What inspired you to write a book?
You mean like when did I start, or what inspires me now?
Well,
Kind of everything?
everything.
I don't know what got me started doing it. I think I just started fooling around with words. Writing in general, I think what started happening was my friend would say, you know, that teacher or that kid is kind of weird. And I'd say, yeah, he or she is like a and a and they'd say, that's exactly it. And I think, you know, I learned that I was real good with metaphor early on, you know, but when making fun of my friends and teachers. I don't know, it just seemed like a thing that happened a lot in school. That's what you did. So it just sort of migrated to the page, and, you know, I wrote really, really bad poems in high school on pink notebook pages with, I think, green ink. Imagine that combination wasn't very good. And then, you know, college, I actually read some very good poems and got inspired to, you know, just want to do that. When you read a poem that you love, you know, it's like music. I don't really understand how you can read a great poem and not immediately want to sit down and try to do it, try to make one like that. And I think that musicians are the same way. How can you listen to music and love it and not want to like grab that instrument and master it so you can do it too? And I have wanted to learn the instrument, but I'm just not very good at it. I have a saxophone and I sort of noodle around on it, but I'm really, really bad. So that's it. I think that in a funny way, I don't know who wrote the first poem, but and what inspired that cave person or whoever it was. But poetry inspires poetry. I mean, there's just a new expression, some new way of jamming those words together that hasn't happened before, some kind of word jazz. So it's often like a line, you hear in your head a line, and it just starts to spin more of itself. Kind of like a spider. Spider's really a poetic creature. I mean, they make a beautiful design, but they're kind of evil, and they got secret, ulterior motives for that web. But, that it comes out of them. It comes out of their abdomen. I don't know really what it corresponds with in humans. I don't want to go there. Walt Whitman did once, and it's not. But it just keeps. There's that poem, "A Noiseless Patient Spider." If you don't know the poem, you should go home and read that. It's so great, and it's just this idea of all this self it's throwing out. It's just unreeling itself, trying to connect with the world. And I think that's what any artist does. You try to find how you fit into the world. I don't know if that answers your question. Yes, I'm back.
So when you're in the midst of these little divine inspirations, are you going to, does that deserve a villanelle, or should I go more for a sonnet, or you just throw it on?
Well, that's a really good question. Villanelles, what has to have happened is that you have to have forced yourself to write a bunch of really bad villanelles, because they're always going to be bad at first. It's just a really hard form when you have to repeat the same 2 lines over and over and over again in a pretty short space. Then, once it's inside you, if you're writing a regular old poem, you're just noodling on the page, you don't know what it's going to be, and certain lines seem to want to be repeated, then you go, oh, I think this wants to be a villanelle, and you just kind of nudge it, and it falls into that structure. But the structure has to be inside you already. It's like a great tennis pro has to have hit that perfect return 100,000 times for it to come up when he needs it, in that awkward position on the court. And so if it's in you, if you know how to do it already, when you need it to be a villanelle, when you need to work in that structure, you have it there. Same with sonnet. I know Molly Peacock writes a lot of sonnets. She works with a lot of highly charged, emotional, devastating material, and she feels that the sonnet form, that 14 lines, that little box, and you have to worry about the rhymes and the rhythm, it helps her cope with the material that she's dealing with, like abusive father. She feels that she's imposing order on it in a way that she's not afraid anymore. She can go and talk about anything because she's got this sort of order policy, and there's nothing can really touch her as long as she's inside that 14-line frame. It's a crazy illusion, of course. You can still be, I suppose, devastated by what comes out. The greatest moment when you're a poet is when you think you know what you're writing a poem about. You think you know. And your pen, it's like a Ouija board. It goes, no, we're going this way. And go, okay. And if you don't learn to say, okay, your poems are just sort of stodgy and they sound kind of prefab. But learning to get in that zone where the poem starts tugging you this way and not knowing that you thought what you just said, not knowing what was in there that comes out, that's pretty amazing. I think it's Studs Terkel who gave a lot of interviews in the 40s with people in the public works, and tape recorders were still fairly new, and he interviewed a lot of people who'd never been taped before in their lives, and he remembers one woman, he taped her answer to a question, a fairly lengthy answer, and he played it back for her, and she went right in the middle, and he stopped the tape and said, what? And she said, I didn't know I thought that. And that's the feeling you have sometimes when you're writing a poem. It just, whoa, where did that come from? And I can't think of anything more exciting. Well, a few things maybe will equal it in excitement, but not for me. I don't know if I answered that question either, but formal stuff, sometimes you really do sit down to try to write a formal poem, but you have to have those lines already. You have to have those lines that can bear repeating, or there has to be some substance already suggesting that form. Because the sonnet is very particular. It has like an argument. It has the three quatrains in the couplet, and it's like argument A, sort of counter-argument, and then kind of, well, expansion or resolution of some kind, hopefully. So it just depends on what you're thinking about. It's hard to sit down with a blank piece of paper and say, I'm going to write a poem. So we have all kinds of tricks to get us out of that. Yeah. Yes, in the middle with the green cap.
A number of your poems that you read for us today were autobiographical in nature, and I was wondering if you thought that, what your opinion was on the fact that people can only really write well about a subject if they experience it. Do you think that that's true, or do you think that maybe the power of the human imagination can allow you to write about any number of topics, even things that you maybe don't know from personal experience?
Yeah, well, that was the problem that you run into when you write about being a soldier in Vietnam. I certainly have never been one, but I think you just need to have talked to enough people who have experienced this thing to get inside it. Randall Jarrell has written a number of poems from the point of view of a woman, and I think they're just brilliant. You may know the poem Next Day or not, just stunning. And I think there are some women who are a little irritated because there's appropriation of territory issues going on there, and I don't think you have to have experienced it to write well about it, but you have to really have thought about it and had a vicarious experience somehow, fully engaged in your imagination, not just, I think I'm going to write a poem about, I don't know, building a hut in the jungle. I mean, I think it has to be something that is deeply touching your marrow somehow, and that you can connect to something in you. Yeah, I guess that's my answer. I think you can write about anything, but there are people who get upset if you do. How can you write a poem about being gay if you're not gay? Or how can you write a poem about, how can you write about a poem about being a murderer? You've never murdered anybody, have you? But I have poems that some people have taken to be from my voice, from me, and I'm horrified. A poem in this book, Misery Prefigured, that's called Patience is a Virtue, and it's a really evil little poem about how patience is a virtue if you're nice, but if you're evil, it's a vice. You can use patience to hurt people too. You can wait just long enough for the right moment to what will hurt the most. Like, wait till your boss is sick and then quit. That sort of thing. I think I'll wait till it really is going to bother her for me to say this. And so I wrote this poem, and the anger just builds and builds and builds, and it's like just dripping with nastiness. And a guy who was teaching ESL, which is English as Second Language, said, I give this to my students, and my immigrant students feel so empowered by this. They say, I feel this anger sometimes, but I think it's wrong. But now I know it's all right. And he says, yes, you see, this poem does it. You can get angry. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what have I done? But once you've written the poem, they use it the way they need to use it. They take it and whatever they want it to be. But I had to say, I meant to show how absurd that kind of anger and evil is. And, he kind of was a little crestfallen then, but he's probably continuing to teach it in the same way. I don't know, as long as you get the passion and the engagement, then you feel that you're teaching well, right? Even if they hate the book, at least they hate the book, and they don't just go, oh, whatever, It's sometimes good when a couple of students in the class really hate the book, and then you get some good discussions, right? I don't know if people have classes they have to get to, I don't want you to feel shy about getting up and going. I don't know if there's a schedule going on at this time. Yeah. Well, I'll take more questions if there are any. I just don't want to trap you here. Although it is kind of fun. I can stand here and talk, and you have to sit there. Stand up and do a wave. Get you to do anything. I think we may have wrapped up the... Well, thank you again for being a great audience, and appreciate this.